One. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Hodges. This is the Common Sense Show, and we are the ones who we like to say are freeing America one enslaved mind at a time. Coming to you live from the Noble Gold Studios. And listen, we've talked about Dodd-Frank and UCC codes and so forth, and we've interviewed a lot of people about this. Uh, they can keep your money. Now, right now, they don't want to. They get to turn around, loan it out, and make a lot of money on fractional reserve banking. We've talked about that. But there could come a day here, the banking industry is not on solid ground because the dollar is not on solid ground right now. And you need to take protective action. Noble Gold can help you with that. They're not going to push you into anything. They're just going to educate you. And by the way, I've been a customer for 8 years of Noble Gold, and you literally have to close your own deal. So what are you going to do? Now you're going to find out more about how to protect your assets by calling 867, right? Excuse me, 877-867-5643, or just go to davehodgesgold.com. That's davehodgesgold.com. And someone who fought against Dodd-Frank, and we're going to talk about James Comey primarily, is our guest in this segment of the Common Sense Show, Jim Rennaci. And I'll tell you, Jim, Congressman Jim is a four-time elected representative to the House, and he fought against Dodd-Frank. You've heard me talk a lot about Dodd-Frank, so how coincidental. Um, Let me just ask you this, Congressman, before we get very deep into the interview. What was your main concern about Dodd-Frank and why you fought so hard against it?
Yeah, well, Dave, again, thank you for having me.
Our pleasure.
The real, the real issue with Dodd-Frank was, again, government overreach. Government continues to get so much overreach, and this was an issue, and we were trying to scale that back, which, of course, we did the best we could. But yeah, when I was a member of the House Financial Services Committee, I actually chaired a committee right next, and Frank was sitting right next to me as the ranking member. So, but yeah, it was just overreach, which is always a problem when it comes from government.
Yeah, do you think it was a reaction to the 2008, 2009 financial debacle?
Well, absolutely. I mean, look, well, one thing I learned about when I was in Washington was we don't get a lot accomplished. It's one of the reasons why I decided to leave. What we do, though, is we always take an issue and use it to our benefit to make legislation, which is exactly where the Dodd-Frank bill came from. It was just overreaction to the 2007 and 8 issues with uh, you know, the financial markets.
Yeah, I can't. I wish I had a dollar for every time I've mentioned Dodd-Frank in the last several years on air because I think it's one of the worst things we've ever done, other than decentralizing the amount of control that the FCC has over how many radio stations, TV stations, and newspapers you can own in one market. And I think that was the undoing of our media. But I think this is the undoing potentially of people's security and faith in the system and banking. Because when I found out about this, I said, well, okay, a little more gold and silver for Dave Hodges, less in the account for them to take when times get tough. Okay, I want to just kind of start this at the top. Folks, when you're hearing this, by the time you've listened to this, you will have awakened to the fact that John Bolton's been indicted to join James Comey. And we're going to go down this path talking about James Comey and the congressman's concerns and observations about that. So, in our pre-air discussion, you mentioned to me Comey might have a little easier time because he is an attorney, but I think he has so much to defend that I don't see how he walks out of this without a plea deal. You take this where you want to go with it, please.
Well, look, and actually I've said time and time again, I think they missed the boat on Comey because could have went after him for the Russia Gate scandal and all the investigations that he did with that. Here, they're going after him for testimony about a leak, and it'll be
Hmm.
interesting. Um, I do think he's a smart enough attorney that he'll be able to, maneuver easily than Bolton. I mean, when you're in the system, you know the system, you've worked the system, it's a little easier than a guy like Bolton who probably never expected to be in this situation, and now is.
Can Comey, I think he can, but can he bring down Obama, Biden, and Hillary with regard to Operation Crossfire and the Russian hoax?
Well, believe me, I think that's one of the things that where I said we missed the boat on. If you're gonna go after Comey, that's where they should have went after him on. So I don't know. I mean, if he, again, he understands litigation, he understands prosecution. I think he's going to keep this. If I was advising him, I think he would keep it as narrow as possible to the claim against him, which is that he basically lied to Congress, and not go that direction unless he sees a problem or unless he wants to get the case over with. I mean, one of the biggest problems when we talked about this again before the show was, these are expensive situations for somebody who is indicted. I mean, you have to protect yourself. You have to have the attorneys. If you don't have the money, you will go in a lot different directions than you may have gone if you have the financial resources to protect yourself.
Yeah, I wonder too if there's any connection with Comey's daughter being fired, and she was removed from DOJ service. That maybe she could have been in a position to help him in some way, alert his attorneys to what's going on. Do you think there's a connection there with he and his daughter?
The one thing I think President Trump's doing is just cleaning up the system from the bottom to the top.
Yeah, I agree.
Many people aren't aware of this, but if you go back to President Clinton, he did the exact same thing. He did cleanse. Most of these presidents just clear the top levels of all these departments. President Clinton went from bottom to top and cleaned everything, and I think that's what you're seeing with President Trump. He's doing the exact same thing, which will actually change the way the departments operate in the future because it takes a president to cleanse the entire department, which I think is part of the reason why Comey's daughter was fired or removed as well.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that no one really talked much about that other than the fact that she was dismissed. And I thought, okay, well, there's a reason. And I actually had talked to Paul Preston about this, the head of the New California movement, and I said, you think they're going to go after Comey and they're getting the daughter out of the way? And he said, it may be, and here it is, he's indicted. It's interesting. What does he face for criminal penalties? I've heard different estimates. Do you have any idea?
No, I don't. I don't know what he totally faces, but it'll be time. It'll be time in prison that he doesn't want. I mean, in the worst case, and I think that's where he's going to be fighting this. And of course, think about it. I mean, you're serving the United States government as a high level official, and years later, you're fighting to stay out of prison, which is really the issue for him and Bolton and all of these individuals. Do I think they're going to end up there? I don't, but crazier things have happened. I believe that this is more about the fight than it is about the outcome.
Let's talk about external ramifications, potentially speaking. If people behind Antifa, the organization that so-called doesn't exist, but if the people behind Antifa and these other rioters in these major cities, if they're upset about the deportation of illegal criminal aliens and they're willing to do what they're doing and engaging now in acts of violence against federal officials, they have bounties on them reportedly. Um, what do you think the Comey trial and the Bolton trial will do? Do you think it'll have any effect on the level of violence we're seeing?
Well, I think it's going to add to the anti-Trump fever that's out there by that's the biggest thing that I think will be the issue. It'll just add to that. I mean, this is going. There is a segment of our um, country that is clearly anti-Trump, and that's the one that we'll be trying to build off of. But in the end, and I've said this, ultimately, it's not going to be about Republicans and Democrats in the next few elections. It's going to be about how independents see all of this. I mean, both the Republican Party and Democrat Party have lost many members of their party to people becoming independents because they're upset with things that they say are political or politicized. And the independents are going to be watching all this, and it'll be interesting to see what their opinion is and how they decide, because that will be the changing point in these general elections. Where do the independents go, and do they just get so frustrated that they vote anti-Trump, which could happen, and vote toward a Democrat, even though it would not be the better candidate, because they say, well, you know what, I'm just fed up with what's going on. And that's where I think the danger of the Comey and Bolton indictments are.
So do you think it was let's say a misstep by the Trump administration to go after those two at this point?
Well, I don't know. I think, like anything else, politics is a 30-day game. We're far enough away from the midterms. The question will really be, is this something that people really get upset with? I fielded a lot of calls yesterday from Republicans saying, what are we doing here? This is, Bolton. Now we're going after Bolton. And I think that's the perception that we don't want. But then there are those Republicans that say, great, let's continue to go after everybody. So, you got two sides of that coin. Everything comes down to who pushes what button in the general election in 2026. 2026 will be a important election year for sure.
Well, certainly the gerrymandering battleground has formed, with Ketanji Brown declaring black people to be a disabled class that needs special attention for redistricting. I played that yesterday on my show, Congressman. I couldn't believe she had the nerve to even suggest what she's saying.
I would agree, but again, she's using a weapon that she's trying to, push out there, and the extreme position like that is ridiculous, but it does get votes. And that's what the game all is about. How do you secure more votes than the other side? I mean, it's one of the reasons why I got out of politics on a national level, because I became frustrated with this as well. In the end, it'd be great if every day we were worrying about the economy, taxes, national defense, all of those basic principles of the federal government. But when you look at it, it's not about that. It's about votes. It's about the next election. It's about securing more votes. And I think these will be the issues that'll all be added up when we get to 2026.
Yeah, I kind of get the tone of where you're going a little bit. We don't want to create political martyrs in the Democratic Party. I get that. But on the other side, I have never seen the behaviors and statements from mainstream Democrats like Hakeem Jeffries and Schumer and, of course, AOC. They are so extreme and they're not even hiding their extreme. But I do agree with you, too, that this could be a trend that people will latch on to some degree, because I wonder if Mondami in New York, if he's not a barometer of how Democrats are feeling.
Well, remember, Mondami is being supported not because he's a radical communist. He's being supported because he's an outsider. So we've done a lot of polling that shows people in this country now just they're fed up with the system, and they're going to vote for an outsider, which is the perfect example of what I fear in 2026. It's the anti I'm tired of the establishment. I'm tired of what's going on. I'm going to pick somebody from the outside, and that outsider may be a Democrat. And that's where the independents will make a big difference. So, Madame, people need to watch the situation in New York, because it's really showing that the American people are just fed up with the status quo, and they want somebody who looks and talks and speaks about making a difference, changing things. Let's face it, in 2016, that's what candidate Donald Trump did, and he won. So that's the trend. The American people are tired of the system that we have, and they want outsiders to go in and change it.
Well, with your experience, and I should say this for the audience benefit, you have an extensive history of being an entrepreneur, owning your own business, various businesses, hiring lots and lots of people. How does all this come back and sit with you in your management situation with regard to your businesses? Is there a direction you lean? Is there a direction you fear? How do you think people in your situation look at this?
Well, that's a great question. Look, business looks at it from a business perspective. I mean, they don't really care about the Comey situation. They don't really care about the Bolton situation. What they do care about is, and I was just talking to a business owner, friend of mine in Dallas, Texas, last week, where he was telling me his prices are going up. He can't get employees. A lot of the employees are being, deported back. A lot of good employees, which um, takes away from the labor market. See, what we have to understand is when you take people out of the labor market, it shrinks the amount of employees. And now you're all fighting for the same employees. Costs are going up. And what he was telling me is that, look, my prices are going up with tariffs. My costs are going up with payroll. My inability to get employees because the labor market is shrinking is increasing. He says, this is not good for me. So think about it. There's a business owner's perspective on what's going on. Now, the perspective of, you know, the individual out on the street is, I believe we should deport everybody, every illegal alien, everyone. Well, uh, that's probably true too. If you're an illegal alien, you are here illegally, there should be a push. But the problem is business looks at it a whole lot different.
Yeah,
And,
that's right.
you know, they're seeing inflation, they're seeing that's also going to be a driver when it comes to the next election.
I couldn't agree with you more about how business is looking at this. You know, I'll go to my own family history on my dad's side. They escaped the beginnings of Nazi Germany, and they came here and they had to go through a naturalization process. And with a few exceptions, that process has disappeared. I mean, I don't want criminal illegal aliens here. I want them deported or put in prison. One or the other. I'd rather see them deported so I don't have to pay 20,000 a year for them. But why aren't we looking at naturalization for nonviolent, productive people living regular lives that have kind of blended in with American society? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, look, you just hit the nail on the head. I 100% believe we need to be looking at, we are a country of immigrants. Our country will grow and prosper as we bring in good, solid immigrants who want to be US citizens. The biggest problem we have when it comes to immigration, and a lot of people don't recognize this, is these people are coming just like my grandparents came here, saying they want a better life. They want to get away from the country that, they want asylum. Those are all the reasons to come to America. The problem is when they cross the border and come in, we don't have the system set up to really process them. And so what happens is we give them the ability to say, hey, come on back in 2 weeks or 3 weeks because we can't actually process you today. And then 2 or 3 weeks pass and they don't come back.
Yep.
That's really the issue with our immigration system. So I've always said, why don't we fix that? Why don't we give everybody an opportunity, come in here, and I don't know whether they wear a bracelet. I mean, everybody says, "Oh, that's terrible." You look, if you want to come here, we need to know where you're at, and you need to go through the process, and then we need to simplify the process. I was on a plane with somebody who is going through the process, and she told me, Congressman, this is the longest and most tedious process I've ever seen. She goes, yeah, can you do anything to reduce and streamline the process? There's another thing we should be looking at. How do we fix that process as well?
I think it's the same one that my ancestors came in under in the 30s and 1930s, and they had to go through a 7 year naturalization period. They had to take a class on U.S. history, the Constitution, pass a test on both, and show some English proficiency before they could become a citizen. Is that the process that's still in effect? Because you sure don't hear about it if it is.
I don't think it's that extensive. It does take a few years to get through it, but you're right. I mean, my grandfather came in the early 20s and didn't become a U.S. citizen until 1939.
Hmm.
So, I mean, he was actually here for almost 12 to 14 years before he became a U.S. citizen. My dad was actually born to my grandparents who were not U.S. citizens. I always use that as a story when somebody says, you know, that these people who are born by people who aren't U.S. citizens should not be U.S. citizens. I mean, my would be one of those people. So,
I hear you. Yeah.
but I do think the process, I think we have to look at the process. We have to make it more streamlined. That doesn't mean we let people in without, you know, going through a process. But this is really the issue. And we do need immigrants. We need legal immigrants. So let's figure out a way to make this work. You know, Dave, I got to tell you an example. Back in when I was in Congress, I'll never forget. We had the majority of the House, we had the majority in the Senate, we had the presidency with Donald Trump back then. Um, we had two bills that we were trying to pass out of the House. One was a little bit moderate, one was a little more conservative, but it was to change the immigration process. I actually voted for both of them, and they both failed. And somebody came up to me and said, Congressman, you voted for bills that were, you know, totally different. One was more conservative, one was more moderate. My answer was, it's because we got to get something done. We have to get something done. And I was willing to pass both of those Republican bills to try and get something done. And again, that was 10 years ago, and nothing's happened ever since.
Yeah, you know, we're not going to be able to. I don't know how many people came in under Biden, 20, 30 million. It's hard for me to estimate. I know what Border Patrol tells me. They say it's upwards of 30 million, but we can't deport 30 million people. That's not possible. And you're going to get some pushback bigger than what we're seeing now. So I think you're right. That is the answer. I wanted to ask a question too because of your work. I mean, I got to hear in my notes you were on the Ways and Means and Budget Committee. You were on Consumer Credit. Um, Talk to us a little bit about the tariffs. We existed as a nation solely on tariffs without an income tax prior to 1913. Would that work today? Is this what you think Trump is trying to move towards?
Look, and I'll have to tell you, you and your listeners up front, I'm not a tariff person. I mean, a tariff is a hidden tax on the American people. Now, if you eliminate the income tax and make it a tariff, that might be a possibility that I would accept. But right now,
Hmm.
we have a very complicated income tax system, and I'm a CPA as well, so I can tell you. And I was part of the 2017 tax and jobs cuts bill. I was one of in my opinion, one of the people who knew more about taxes than most on our committee. There were several business people on there, but um, we can't just, the tariffs right now are an additional tax, and they're starting to creep in to the system, which is part of the problem. I mean, President Trump was right. If we impose a 25% tariffs, businesses will absorb some of that. That's true. And that's what we've seen so far. Businesses have absorbed some of it, but it is starting to creep into our prices as businesses absorb less and less of it. So, do I think tariffs could do some good things? Yes. But the problem is the penalties of the taxpayer paying more money for consumer goods is going to last too long. Now, it's like the auto industry. You could easily say, well, let's keep these tariffs on and bring all the American manufacturing, all the automobiles back to be manufactured in the United States. Well, that's a 10-year process. I mean, it took us 25 years to make the automobile manufacturing process a North American process, which was, you know, Mexico, Canada, and the United States. Now you want to convert that back, you're talking years and years. Well, if you're going to tariff these automobiles, the American people are going to pay for it for years and years. And I'll tell you the key that a lot of people don't understand. As soon as President Trump is gone, the next president, whoever that may be, could say, I'm eliminating all these tariffs. So no one is in the long game. It was part of the other problem I have with being in Washington. If you're going to fix the system, you got to be in for the long game. Yeah, we could see that already with this big, beautiful bill that was just passed. Part of the ways of paying for it was to eliminate the subsidies, right? Well, now all of a sudden we're talking about adding the subsidies back for Obamacare. Well, nobody's in it for the long game. Everybody's in it for the next election. And that's what causes real problems with the system ever being fixed.
I've looked at the claims on the budget dispute for the government shutdown, and I've looked at both plans. One is the Republican just to keep things as they are for the time being, and then we'll negotiate. That's their official position. And the Democrats want $3 trillion more, with half of it going towards illegal alien health care. And I look at, but they deny it. But here's what the Democrats are saying, and I want you to give me your take on this. They're saying Trump is cutting health care for 20 million people. They're not saying Americans, they're not saying citizens. Is the illegal alien health care issue, is that on the table here or is it not? Who's telling the truth?
Well, I do think it's on the table, but remember, when you use 20 million, they're not all illegal aliens. So what the Democrats are going to do is they're going to go out and find 10, 15 people, American citizens struggling every day to get by who need those subsidies. And those will be the poster children of or poster child of the next election. And that's what people have to understand. It won't be about the illegals. It'll be about those that are suffering because they can't afford health insurance. So we got to be really careful there. But I will also tell you, Dave, one other thing that I've said where I think the Republicans are making a mistake, get back to Washington. Start looking at, start evaluating all of these things. We got a budget bill that needs passed. We got reconciliation that needs to be looked at. We've got all these appropriation bills that need to be done. And yet the House Speaker is keeping everybody home because he's saying, no, we passed the bill to keep the government open. When I was in Washington, when I was a member of Congress and we shut the government down, we never left. I spent New Year's Eve with my colleagues because the government was shut down and we wanted to show the American people that we were there to negotiate and fix the problem. I believe the Speaker of the House is making a big mistake by not having the House in session so that they could at least be saying, even though they might not be doing it, they could at least be saying, we're here trying to figure out a solution.
I think I know at least one reason why they're not. I'd like you to comment on this. I'm in Arizona, and we had a special election after Grivaldi died, and his daughter got elected. And as long as they're not in session, she doesn't get seated. And what I'm reading is that she could carry the deciding vote to free up the Epstein files for public dissemination. What's your take on that?
Well, 100% agree. And by the way, it's another gamesmanship that's going to come back and haunt Republicans because, normally when somebody is elected, they're seated within 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
She has not been seated yet, and she is 218th vote on the petition, which will force the House of Representatives to vote on the Epstein files and the releasing of 100% of the Epstein files. I can tell you because somebody said to me, well, why do you think that's going on right now? Why do you think they're holding back? Well, remember, there are 4 Republicans that signed on with the Democrats, and I guarantee you they are being talked to every day to get their name off of that petition so that we don't get to 218. That has to be the only reason we're not back in session because,
Exactly.
but remember, those 4 people are not pulling their names off the petition. You got 3 women, and then you got Thomas Massey. I mean, if any of the 3 women pulled their name off the petition, it would be a political nightmare for them in their reelections because people will say you're not going to defend these young girls that were. So it's going to be interesting. I think in the end, we're just prolonging what's ultimately going to happen. She's going to be seated at some point in time.
Yeah.
They are going to have 218 votes. And let's get it over with, in my opinion.
We have some interesting politicians here in Arizona, and I'm being kind when I say that. And one of them is our Attorney General, Chris Mays. But she just said something yesterday I happen to agree with. She said the failure to seat is illegal and unconstitutional, and we're filing suit next week. And I actually support that because the woman's elected. She has a right to her seat, and they're playing games. But I'm wondering too, and I don't know if you have an opinion on this or not, and if you don't, that's okay. But I think this is less about protecting people who might be on the list that are currently in public office as it is to potential people or organizations that are foreign, and it would do damage to some of Trump's peace initiatives if some of this came out. Do you have any opinion on that?
Think it's all the above. And I would agree with you, because people will say, well, Biden had this same information. Why didn't he release it? Well, Biden, for all the positives and negatives, anybody wants to talk about Biden, he probably looked at this thing and said, wait a minute, there's some people on here, there's some foreign government people here that we need to protect. We're not going to release this, even though it could be damaging to President Trump or at that time candidate Trump, we're not we're not going to do this. The problem was, and I've said this all along, President Trump came out during that same time and said, when I get in office, we're releasing those files.
Yes, right.
And if you remember, even Pam, that was one, by the way, that was one of his campaign promises.
Yes.
And then when Pam Bondi became Attorney General, she said, we're going to release the Epstein files. I have them right on my desk. So something has changed. And it's probably that President Trump and Attorney General Bondi have looked at this and said, "Whoa, there's some problems here. There's some traps for Trump, but there's also some traps for some other people." And 100% agree with you. That's the reason why I don't think they want these files released.
Yeah, and you're right about the three women not capitulating and changing their name on the petition. And Massey, there's no way he's going to back down. So that's it's going to be an interesting showdown. But I'm going to tell you, Trump's going to lose in court on this. Johnson's going to lose because that woman's going to get seated, and it's going to happen quickly. And then it's going to be Katie bar the door. But you know what's interesting? I don't know who's all on the list. But I got to believe if it implicates politicians in America, it's on both sides of the aisle.
100%. No, there is no doubt about it. I think both sides of the aisle. I think there are some senior government officials from other countries that it's going to implement. This will be a big issue, and I think it'll taint President Trump as well. I mean, I don't think he did anything wrong, but I do think Epstein was a friend. And let's face it, when somebody's a friend, you're going to be seen with him, you're going to be around him, and those implications are going to come out as well.
I,
So
I
yeah,
agree.
there's a lot that will come out when these Epstein files are 100% released.
I think it would be guilt by association. And I'll tell you why I say that. If you look into Epstein's background, he was into finance long before he became a huge child sex trafficker. And I could see how Trump and his business position and other people too would have had some kind of professional relationship with him. And when you have a professional relationship with someone, you go to lunch, you go to events, don't necessarily go to Epstein Island, but I think that this is something that Trump might be concerned that even if he's not guilty of anything, it'll be a guilt by association claim by the Democrats.
Absolutely. No, I would agree with you. And you're 100% right too when you this was a business relationship. And Epstein got a lot of investors in his company and he had a lot of events and he probably started this process as a way of, having these events where people would come and then it just grew into this sex trafficking situation. But yeah, it's going to be implication for sure. It's something I don't think President Trump wants out there. Um, but I also think it's going to be damaging for a lot of people on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, amen to that. I want to prevail on your expertise to go off the beaten path just for a second. I've seen things out there, and I'm not sure how accurate it is, although I'm seeing support from the people that are being talked about. The tokenization of all assets, and because of your work in Congress on various financial committees, do we have anything to worry about from like BlackRock and Larry Fink's talking about tokenization of everything except maybe for biological beings. And that's supposed to happen allegedly this week. Do you want to weigh in on that? Because I don't know what to think.
Specifically, what do you mean? So I can
Okay,
answer the
well,
question.
Larry Fink has been quoted in some of his talks at the World Economic Forum that he favors tokenization of assets. It's more convenient, business will flow faster, all the usual excuses like we got with Swift and all that. And so, for convenience sake, that we should go to more of a tokenization digital system, cashless in all assets like what you own, your house, your car, and so forth. Those are all tokenized.
Yeah.
And the concern of people that I talk to is that if you can tokenize everything, and put it into a digital atmosphere, the wrong people in charge can really make things difficult for people who are non-compliant with a ruling class.
Look, I 100% agree with that. I mean, I tell people the biggest fear we should have is digitizing assets, the Bitcoin, all of these things, because uh, you're exactly right. Anybody, if it gets in the wrong hands from a computerization situation, it could be a disaster. I mean, I do know that members of Congress, even the president, vice president, and some senators were highly supported in their elections by the digital asset Bitcoin companies, and so they support this. And there are some that want to see the currency be replaced, the U.S. dollar be replaced, but with a digital currency. I would fear that. I hope we never go down that path. I don't understand it as well as I probably should, because I do think there are people who want it to be done. But I think that the biggest disaster could be, and it's what you just said, is that that gets into the wrong hands, and all of a sudden you could change economies overnight, which would be, in my opinion, would be extremely concerning.
Yeah, that's the macro view, and I totally agree with you on that. But I'm also concerned about the micro view, like with social credit that we're beginning to see unfold in the UK and as well in place in China. Because I'm wondering in the wrong hands if we wouldn't go down that road of, we're going to eliminate all dissent. There's no First Amendment. We'll redirect your assets. In fact, the Europeans, and I'm sure you're aware of this, are talking about, shall we say, I hate to say the word, but almost confiscating savings accounts to spend in ways they deem appropriate because savings account are doing nothing lying dormant, which is the purpose of savings. And the Europeans are going down this route of confiscating private assets. At least they want to do it on paper. Should we be worried about that here?
I absolutely do think we should be worried about that. And there are some fringe Democrats who believe in that.
I
I
know.
mean, that's the real problem. I mean, they truly believe that the wealthiest who have worked hard, done the right things, lived the American dream, that their wealth and their assets should not be theirs. And that's a real issue. Look, there are going to be extremes. And when I was in Washington, there are extremes on the right, there are extremes on the left. The middle at least gives us some balance, but we have to make sure that the extremes, don't become the norm, which is a real problem, especially when it comes from that extreme Democrat side. Um, and we're going to see that, by the way, in New York, because we're going to elect a mayor who's an extremist, and we'll see where he goes. I mean, there are already a lot of businesses who are saying, look, he's probably going to win. We have to figure out how to work with him. So we'll see what happens there as well.
I would think Florida would be an option for a lot of these people.
Yeah.
You're right on the money with what you're saying, at least from my perspective. It's scary. But in terms of, you say we want to avoid the extremes and stay in the middle, that is my hope too. But when you've got Bernie Sanders and AOC and they're out there debating uh, on behalf of the Democratic Party, they're not in the middle. I mean, they are fascists, and I'm not saying that to be insulting, but that's their ideology. What's ours is ours, and what's yours is also ours. That's how I think they look at us.
Well, what's interesting about them, and I try and watch. One thing I did when I was in Congress is I watched I watched Fox, I watched CNN, I watched MSNBC. I tried to watch them all so you get a perspective of what's going on. It gives you a little bit more balanced perspective. If you're just watching Fox only, you only get the Fox perspective. But if you watch them all, so I still do that. And I was watching their CNN uh, debate, discussion, whatever. But if you really watch what they were doing, is they're trying to convince people that they're change artists. They're going to make a difference. And remember, this is what America wants. They
Yeah, I hear you.
want the status quo broken. So there are people watching them who don't know them because look, you and I are in politics every day. I mean, I live it, I breathe it. I wish I wasn't so deep into it, but 80% of Americans are just doing what they need to do to get by. They're just living their life. They don't even know who Bernie Sanders is. Some of them don't even know who AOC is. They turn on that station and just start watching and they go, wow, kind of like those people without really understanding who they are and what they believe and what they support. And that's what we should fear as well, because the electorate isn't paying attention in many cases.
That is, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Well, Congressman, you have a group that you're associated with called Compass Care Community. Can you tell our audience more about that?
Uh, I don't have a group
Oh, I
Compass
thought you
Care.
did. I have it down here in my notes.
Compass Care. No,
Oh, okay.
I'm part of Jefferson Rising. It's a 501(c)(4) that really supports, you know, basic principles of government. Uh, that's that's a big that's a big issue for me. Let's get back to smaller government, less spending, all of those things. That's the real key. I'm still a driver that our national debt is one of our greatest threats to our country, and we seem to have forgotten about it. So I'm going to continue to work to make sure people are aware of what the national debt could do to us if it continues to expand at the rate it's expanding.
Okay. My apologies for that. That was in my show notes from our mutual friend, but um, the group is Jefferson Rising. How do people find that?
JeffersonRising.org. It's on the website. As you can find anything these days, it's out there. And yeah, we're doing a lot to promote, the basic principles of government, getting back to I should say, the basic principles of a strong Republican government, which is less taxes, smaller government. We're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to support candidates who believe in those things. And hopefully, we can get the national debt recognized as probably one of our greatest threats. Keep in mind, when I ran for Congress, and that wasn't that long ago, the national debt was $9.5 trillion. Today it's 38 trillion. It's growing exponentially. And I don't think people realize what happens if it gets too high and we start to collapse the system because the debt is too big for the government to handle. I mean, you can print all the money you want, but at some point in time, um, this will be a big issue for our country.
Yeah, we have, I think, crossed the Rubicon with that because we're having trouble just financing the interest on the debt. And to me, that's the deal breaker. And that's really scary. You triggered a thought in me, and this is something I keep coming across. And I think if it was this easy, it would already have been done. But I'm hearing that Trump is, obviously he's pushing Bitcoin and so forth, stable coin and all that. And the thought is that people aren't going to put their profits into the dollar into savings accounts. They're going to go to something else like a stable coin. And then Trump is going to follow up by revaluing the gold from $42 an ounce to whatever the spot market is. Like today, I think it's a little over 4,000. Do you think that's possible? And would that be enable Trump to pay off the debt?
Well, look, I think President Trump's trying to do some unique things. I'm not sure what all his thoughts are, but I hope a president doesn't have that much power because if he or she does, we're in trouble down the road. So, but he definitely is a supporter of Bitcoin. But I think your listeners need to look at what happened to Trump's coin last Friday. I mean, it dropped 80% in one day. That's the problem with a digital asset. The valuation can move that drastically that people that are investing in it better understand it, because you could wipe out your entire portfolio in one day if you're tied that deeply into Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, you got to ride the crest because it goes both ways, and I know that I got a little bit myself, and I just kind of live with the rises and the falls. The trend curve has been good for the last 2 years, and we just set a record a week ago. There was 125,000 on the close for Bitcoin, but right now we're looking at the up and downs, and people got to roll with that. Gold's much more stable, but the bottom line is you got to fix your spending. That's That's the bottom line.
100%.
And if we're going to
Our,
pay,
our country, our country is not about revenues anymore. It's about spending. And by the way, and I talk about this all the time. I know Republicans get mad at me, but Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security interests are the drivers of our national debt. They are growing at a rapid pace. I'm not saying they need to be eliminated, but somebody needs to look at them. But politically, nobody will. And the reason is it's a death sentence to your reelection to say we want to look at Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. But there's some easy fixes if people would just recognize it. And I think that's another thing that our country and our politicians need to really look at. How do I reform these things? They're out of control. They're growing at a very rapid pace. Let's figure out a way to reform them.
yeah, I couldn't agree with you more because what we're doing is not working, and funding illegal alien healthcare, no matter how compassionate we want to be, it's economic suicide. And I just can't believe that the Democrats think that this is going to fly. But you made a really good point. 80% of the people are largely ignorant of the intricate issues here and that are involved. By the way, too, United Healthcare, and this is where people are going to lose healthcare coverage in rural areas that are American citizens. United Healthcare is canceling a lot of the Part B Medicare in rural areas for financial reasons, and I expect the Democrats to use that as saying, "Look what Trump is doing."
Yeah, I would agree. Look, that's going to be the 2026 election. It's going to be trying to show. I mean, that's why. Look, if I had to bet, I do believe that the House and Senate come back in and they vote to support subsidies and they vote to support adding some of these dollars in that the Democrats are asking for. And I'm not going to say it's the majority of Republicans, but it will be enough Republicans to get it passed so they can be reelected. That's what it comes down to in Washington. It's not about what's right, it's about what's right for your reelection. And I
Yeah.
think you'll see that occur over the next few months. I had a member that, I still keep in close ties with many of my colleagues down there. And this member said to me, Rennaci, when you were here, remember how we fought to eliminate Obamacare? He goes, we will be voting to sustain Obamacare over the next few months. Republicans will be voting to do that. And I believe that's probably the case.
And it's a disaster. It's it's absolute. My son's going to soon be in the insurance market. I'll tell you, we've looked at this. Anything that can be wrong with an insurance plan is wrong with Obamacare. And I'm just speaking financially, not politically. I don't care that it came from Obama. I'm just saying it's not any good. And you're right about, I think a lot of these issues are going to mushroom into the 2026 midterm. It's going to get ugly. Well, our guest has been former Congressman Jim Rennaci, and you can follow his good work by going to jeffersonrising.org. That's jeffersonrising.org. And I wish people like you were still in Congress. I want to close with that remark because you
You
were the
know,
self-made man. I mean, you built business up from your bootstraps, and you supported unions and for workers and workers' rights. And you're the kind of person we need in Congress, not a consummate deal maker just to get reelected.
I appreciate that. And I hear that all the time. I was a big supporter of the veterans as well. And I think, look, the best member of Congress, in my opinion, is the one who doesn't care if they get reelected, but are willing to do the right things. And too often, and that was me. I mean, if I didn't get reelected, I went back to being in the business world, and that was okay. And with that attitude, I actually ended up my last election. I ended up getting 68% of the vote, and I was endorsed, believe it or not, by some Democrats, members, uh, uh, um, mayors in my district because they said, you know what, we may disagree with this guy, but at least he's willing to listen and willing to get things done, and he's willing to do the right thing for the district, which I think is important as well.
And when I look at that definition of a cooperative politician working for the people, I only see one side, one person on the left. And don't laugh when I say this. I'm going to say John Fetterman. Um, at least he says, I'm going to listen to you, and it's not just lip service. But the rest of them, it's like if they talk to a Republican, they're ostracized and put in the corner. I mean, look at Schumer. I think Schumer's going to lose his Senate seat to AOC. He's going to get primaried out.
There's a chance of that. And by the way, if you go back to my history in Congress, you'll see that I had a bipartisan breakfast every Tuesday morning with
Hmm.
both sides. It wasn't because I was giving in to them. I was just listening to them. And I was able to get them to actually support bills that I was promoting because we were talking. That doesn't happen anymore. In fact, that bipartisan breakfast, from what I understand, is totally gone. And you just hit the nail on the head. If a Republican sees you at a Democrat, sitting around with Democrats or vice versa, you're a bad guy in Washington. Well, you don't have to give up your principles or values to sit down with the other side and see if you can bring them to support the issues that you're trying to get accomplished. And I think that's a key as well.
Yeah, and this is what we need more of. Would you advise, I guess I'm going on a limb by saying it this way, but would you advise the Democrats to strongly discourage what's going on with the riots against federal officials?
Oh, absolutely. No, I think that if the Democrats would have a face, and I do think there are some Democrats out there that are becoming the face, but people aren't getting behind them. For instance, the governor of Pennsylvania, he's got a 70% approval rating.
Yeah, he does.
So he's got Republicans and Democrats supporting him. He is the voice of reason, but if you notice, he hasn't risen to the top. The people who are rising to the top are AOC.
That's right.
Uh, you know, so the way that Democrats will win in the future is to have some of these reasonable governors step up and rise to the top. The governor of Kentucky is believed to be reasonable. The governor of Pennsylvania. There are governors out there who could step up and people say, you know what? I could vote for them. And it gets back to what I said to you about independents. The independents will say, I might lean Republican, but I could vote for that guy because he sounds reasonable. And I think that will be what's most damaging for the Republican Party if we're not careful.
I think you're right, but even if Democrats aren't actively involved in cooperating with the funders of these riots, the fact that they're not coming out and definitively saying this is not the way we handle our problems, I think is going to hurt them with the electorate.
I agree with you. No, that's what I'm saying. The voice of reasonableness needs to
Yeah.
come from the Democrats, and the Democrat needs to say, this is not the way we need to handle this stuff.
Any plans to get back into politics?
No, I mean, I can tell you that I tried, I got in there, I fought the fight. I realized, and I tell people, Washington, D.C. is so broken that the only way we're going to fix it is to have strong governors who say no more, no more. Because you got to remember that our founders wanted to give the federal government limited power.
Right.
And the federal government was only supposed to handle limited issues. Defense was their main. I mean, the reason all the states came together is they wanted the federal government to defend them by bringing all the states together. They also, whether it was interstate commerce, the postal system, all those things, That was the purpose of the federal government. Now the federal government gets involved in everything and anything. And I think the best way to fix this system is I tell people that want to go to Washington, good luck. You're going to find the same. I mean, good people, I hate to say this because there are good people who stay longer, but anybody who stays more than 8 years is part of the problem. Because if you can accept going somewhere every single day and not getting anything accomplished, that's a real problem. And that's the reason I left. I couldn't take it anymore. We weren't getting anything accomplished. And I thought, this is such a broken system. We got to get the state stronger. And I've been working toward that as well.
I couldn't agree with you more. And it sounds like you favor term limits like I do. Um, it's been a fascinating
Absolutely.
conversation, Congressman. I really appreciate you coming on. As things develop, feel free to get a hold of us. Love to have you back on.
That'd be great. Same here. You do the same. You have a great day, and let's talk soon.
You too. Thank you.